Hello, Crow's Cupboard. It's wonderful to see you all again. So, we once again are broadcasting from beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, our new permanent location. I hope that today finds you all well. It's an exciting day. It is the day after the new moon, so hopefully we'll have a chance to spend a little time talking about the new moon and talking about what to do in the new moon. So more of you will be coming in as time passes, and please, as you come in, say something, say a little hello, or at least let me know that you're present, so that will turn on your light and make it easier for me to find anyone who might be looking for you, so to speak. I hope that you're all having a beautiful start to October. I know with October being with us now, a lot of people are getting into the festivities and trying to prepare for Halloween. Hi Connie, good to see you. Hi Jessica, good to see you too. Hi Lynn, good to see you. A lot of people are trying to get ready for festivities that they might be celebrating. Hi Samantha, good to see you. Some people might be getting ready to prepare their costumes or any kinds of baked treats that they might have for this season. It's a wonderful time of year. It's probably my favorite. I love autumn. Hi Debbie, good to see you too. I love fall. I love the crispness in the air. I love the sense of relief that comes from the shifting of the seasons. Now back east, obviously, we always like to watch the changing of the leaves. There's not that here, but there is a distinct change in the pressure and a distinct change in the flow of air, which is very nice. There's a certain kind of briskness that is indisputable. I think most people who love fall and autumn talk about that a lot, but it's really, really clear here. So the crispness that we feel here, for me at least, is a lot sharper than the kind of crispness that comes in with fall and autumn back east. It's very, very refreshing. Hi Peggy, great to see you. As you come in, of course, those of you who have any questions, now's the time for them. We can talk about the Mercury retrograde and how's that going for everyone. I have recognized a few of you have been mentioning some different kinds of technical problems you've been having. I know a few people have been losing their keys. Hi Cindy, good to see you. Thank you, I like it too. Some of you have been talking about different sorts of arguments you've been having. You know, communication problems are very common during Mercury retrograde, and we're still in the throes of it. It won't be finishing up for the actual retrograde until right around the 20th to the 22nd. You'll see the final and farthest perigee of Mercury exiting the retrograde cycle, but we'll still have a 1 to 2 week shadow of that. And those effects will stay with us. Hopefully they will lessen and diminish a little bit. Yeah, your hair is purple. That's excellent. I love purple. It's a great color. I hope that when we watch the lessening, hi Lisa, it's good to see you. I hope that when we see the lessening of the Mercury retrograde cycle, we are taking stock in what we've learned during that cycle. Because, you know, the point to retrogrades, if there's a point, and I believe that there is one. Hi Brittany, good to see you, miss you too, is that we learn from whatever difficulties we've suffered. I think that's the point to all of these sorts of challenges, however we experience them, whether we're experiencing them as retrogrades or if we're experiencing them as movements that impact our personal natal configuration negatively. Hi Cindy, happy autumn to you as well. I hope that we recognize that the trials and tribulations we suffer with any kinds of cosmic shifts or movements are some that we can use to our advantage. We can certainly make for learning moments out of a lot of these things. For instance, in this Mercury retrograde, I have really learned, you know, there's a point to economizing on what you say. I am known for spending a lot of time in conversation and keeping people engaged in conversation. And sometimes that's not really necessary. Sometimes that's not something that really benefits everyone. Sometimes there's time for silence, and that's something that I've learned. And it's a lesson that's not new to me. I've learned it a few times, but in this retrograde cycle, it's really become very apparent to me that there is a point to being quiet. There's a point to taking a moment to evaluate what's being said in the room and what should be said versus what shouldn't be said. Cindy says, I think the leaves are already falling off the tree. Yeah, there are a lot of leaves falling back east. I've seen pictures and some of the colors are shifting because you've had a few temperature drops, and then of course it gets hot again and the trees don't know what they're doing, but a lot of them are starting to change their colors and drop their leaves. It's very, very exciting. The Saturn and Jupiter retrogrades that we're going through and have been going through for a little bit now, I hope are teaching us about cosmic reciprocity, because that is the point to Saturn retrograde, and where we find our fortunes. That's the point to Jupiter retrograde, isn't it? When we think about how we might learn from these two masters, we should consider what we've been doing to properly appreciate cosmic reciprocity, what we've been doing to really understand the give and take, not only of our own environment, but of the relationships that we have and the relationships that we have an impact on. Cindy Nelson says it's been raining out, and Peggy says, true for me too. Let's see. She says, true for me too. I've been focusing on lesser. I'm being given lessons, some given before, but requiring a new perspective. Yeah, very new perspectives are very valuable. Debbie says, JC, would it be appropriate to make a divination tool to connect with spirit in a cemetery? What would I need to gift as offering, and what enchantment, what enchantment would be needed? Should I use a circle of, and if I hit the C more, I can read the rest possibly. Circle of salt for the board I would be using to work on. That's a great question, Debbie. What I would recommend, if you are trying to connect with a specific spirit in a cemetery rather than a general spirit, which is probably not a great idea when it comes to reaching out to the dead. I would never go general. I would always try to keep it specific. I would not just open myself to whomever wants to show up. I would always want to be very specific about who I was reaching out to. So I would want to reach out to a specific spirit, and I would want to make sure that I was protecting myself appropriately. I wouldn't want to necessarily use a circle of salt in a cemetery, as that might upset the energetic ecosystem of the cemetery. Let me take a moment and explain that. Cemeteries are very unique energetic ecosystems. Not only do you have cemeteries that are designed in such a way that certain rituals have been performed in the ceremonies that went into constructing the cemetery for the protection of those who are put to rest there, but also for the protection of those who come and visit those who are put to rest there. But you also have certain rituals that are done after the establishment of the cemetery that are based on different faith traditions, or that might be based on the individual practices of specific individuals. And so when you think of a cemetery as an energetic ecosystem, it always stands out. It's very unique and appealing to a lot of different kinds of intermediaries. There are a lot of Loas that show up in cemeteries. There are a lot of Orishas that show up. The Fae are frequently found in cemeteries. Obviously, numerous dead are found in cemeteries. So there are numerous entities that show up in cemeteries, and that's why I would avoid using something like a salt circle in a cemetery or casting a circle in a cemetery, only because that does tend to impact that very fragile energetic ecosystem. And by impacting that fragile energetic ecosystem, it also might draw negative attention to ourselves, Debbie. So I wouldn't want to perform any kinds of intense warding rituals or protection ceremonies when I'm in a cemetery, only because that would be obtrusive and would draw attention to you. Instead, I would carry multiple protective talismans, and I would make sure that I was maintaining skin contact with them. I would go for a prime number, applying the principle of primes, and I would make sure that I was keeping my mental focus on these protective talismans through the duration of my ritual. So that's step number one. A piece of jet, perhaps, a mercury dime, perhaps, If you have any medals dedicated to any saints whom you are fond of, that would be useful as well. If you have any kind of personal reliquaries from ancestors of your own intended to protect you, that would be useful. Items of iron would be very useful. And you may keep salt on your person. I usually keep a pocket full of salt. And I think these are very good steps towards protecting yourself in a cemetery or a graveyard. The difference is whether or not the land has been consecrated or not, but largely the ecosystems are identical. What I would say is, if you are going to make your divination tool in the cemetery to connect with the spirit in the cemetery, all you would have to do is to properly consecrate the tool in the cemetery, and hopefully, if you want the best results, on the grave of the individual you are seeking to contact. So hypothetically, let's say you designed a pendulum board. Those are very popular, and you wanted to make sure that this pendulum board was synced to a specific decedent who you wanted to speak to. Then what I would do is go to the grave of the decedent, set the board on that grave, and communicate with that specific decedent, asking them for their blessings in communicating through this board. That way there's not any confusion about who you're talking to, and there's not any confusion about who you want to talk to, and that this is the device in question. No need for a salt circle, but there is still need for you to keep yourself protected. So, protect yourself, go to the specific grave if you are trying to speak to a specific individual, set the item on the grave, consecrate it by asking for that spirit's permission to communicate with them through that device. Now, the one thing that a lot of people who do cemetery work or graveyard work forget about is paying the right amount of respect to the different guardians of the cemetery. And depending on what tradition you belong to, there's lots of different guardians of the cemetery. I recognize in my tradition Oya and Alaguana. I also recommend that we pay proper recognition to Baron Samedi and the Geede. And the offerings that you can leave for these Loa and Orishas and intermediaries depends on really what style of tradition you're practicing. If you practice no style of tradition, the universally accepted items for all of these guardians are dimes, white feathers, aspirin. I've recommended aspirin many times in the past, and okra. I know that sounds strange, doesn't it? But it is universally accepted and gets a lot of traction. If, however, you have an intimate relationship with the intermediary that you're working with or that you have familiarity with, then I would say make sure you are giving an offering that is specific to them and that is very, very much favored by them. If you're making an offering to the guardians of the cemetery, it is also important that you leave some sort of an offering for the specific entities you wish to communicate with. And typically I will leave bread or candy, and if I knew that in life they enjoyed tobacco or alcohol, I will leave these as well. So, no need to cast a salt circle in a cemetery. As I said, that would erode the energetic ecosystem of the cemetery or graveyard. But great question, and one that offered us a chance for a lot of clarity. I'm going to move along. Peggy says less, correcting the lessons word. She says, oh my god, spell check. Yeah, I know. I hate spell check. It's so difficult. And then, this is so tricky when I'm trying to move along in the statements. You just have to fast forward sometimes, it seems like. She says, what are we donation tool? Lessons. I apologize. Every time I touch it, what it does is it goes down and makes it almost impossible to read everything that's been said. Okay, so I'm just going to go to the bottom. Peggy says you've started leaving an aspirin and a bit of coffee as an offering, wanting to connect with spirits that you know. I think that's excellent, and that is absolutely a great recommendation in the right direction, because coffee is almost universally accepted. Aspirin I always recommend. Dee Dee Duvall says hello. Hi Dee Dee, how are you? Let me see. Now I'm going to try to go to the question that was above Peggy's statement, and it was... Samantha says, how would you recommend charging a quartz crystal I found in a mine, and what are quartz good for? Great question, Samantha. Quartz crystals are universal. They are good for everything. Now, when I say that, let me give a qualifier. You know how In Doctor Who, that sonic screwdriver could be used for almost everything. For those of you who like Doctor Who, that's how the quartz crystal is. It can be used for almost everything. Traditionally, quartz crystals are given specific designations as either information carriers or generators, or sometimes they will change the directions of things, the flows of energy. Sometimes they're used for purification. There is many different uses for quartz. What I would say is that if you can't tie down what you want to use your quartz for, just to use a quick turn of phrase, universally use them for good fortune, for good luck, for attracting prosperity, and for attracting an abundance of the things that you desire. And the best way to charge a quartz crystal, in my opinion, is in the light of the full moon. Now, a lot of people will recommend you also use the light of a waxing moon, all the way from the waxing crescent through the third quarter to the waxing gibbous and then into the full. I actually think that it's better to do a short, very high energy charge just on the evening of the full moon. Leave it in a windowsill, or perhaps drop it into a glass of water and leave that glass of water in the windowsill. But I think that a full moon charge for a quartz crystal is the absolute best. And what I recommend is, if you have one that you're very particular to, that you want to keep on you and that you've been getting good results with, charge it every full moon. Mark your calendar and make sure that you make that one of your full moon rituals. You're leaving it on the windowsill, or you're putting it in a glass of water and letting it charge in the full moon light. But excellent question. And Debbie says, okra, yes, does sound strange, but I bet the animals would like it. Yes, that's a good point I'm going to bring up in a moment. Thank you so much, JC. Deeply appreciate it. We'll take all of your advice. Thank you, Debbie. I appreciate that. Appreciate the great questions. Okra, Debbie brings up a good point of being liked by animals. There's a functionality to sacrifices. We don't want to leave sacrifices that are just going to litter a cemetery or litter a sacred space. We want to leave sacrifices that will be either consumed or collected by those who will make use of it. For instance, one thing that I frequently leave is bread, because bread is universally going to be consumed. Aspirin, less so, but it does dissolve quickly and does actually help to either clean the stones you've left it on or improve the pH balance of the soil that it gets absorbed into. I'm not saying that you need to be extra green about how you go about your sacrifices, but, you know, for instance, I would never leave a packet of zebra cakes still in their wrapper. That would be ridiculous, and it would just be rude. I would take them out of the wrapper, leave the cakes, and keep the wrapper in a box that I dispose of away from the cemetery or away from the graveyard. I also wouldn't want to leave something very lavish or ornate that is obviously not either A, biodegradable, or B, going to be used by other people, like a piece of electronics. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. Or some very complex tool with multiple working parts. That would just sit there and collect dust and be obtrusive and somewhat obnoxious. So you want to leave things that are sensible, things that will probably biodegrade, and things that I hope you understand would be liked by the people or the things you're trying to communicate with. Now, the exception to this might be something like special attractive stones, or as I've said, I even leave money. Well, money is universally a symbolic tool that we use to not only appeal to intermediaries and decedents, but also to represent power and authority. So I think the leaving of money is acceptable. Some people leave very precious stones, or sometimes not precious at all stones. If you ever go to a Jewish cemetery, you'll see that stones are left on the graves of those who have passed in memory of the experiences that those who passed on had with the living who have come to the grave and left those stones. So stones are usually symbolic of memories had during life, and they might also be meant to comfort the dead. This is why in ancient Europe you saw the tradition of laying cairns. It's a pile of stones that would be made over a body instead of a burial in the soil. And so this collection of stones is meant to shield them from the elements. and you continue that tradition on by leaving stones on the grave. If someone you knew loved specific kinds of precious stones, leaving those precious stones in the grave is a good idea. And for children who've passed on, there are usually a lot of people who will leave balloons and stuffed animals, because these are somewhat appropriate to the decedent, but I try to avoid things that will break down or get consumed by animals. Samantha says, do I have to clear it first? If so, how would I go about that? Samantha, I think that when you are putting the quartz crystal into the full moon water, that is, into the full moon or into the water in the full moon, that should be a more than adequate clearing, because full moonlight also is a very powerful clearing tool. A lot of people don't know that, but it's very, very efficient at clearing away negative energies and filling whatever's getting cleared with positive energies that are intended to fortify the crystal or the item or the tool that's being placed in the moonlight. There is a Dorothy Ralston here for Melanie June Miller. Melanie, Dorothy, your grandmother wants you to look after Marilyn. She says she has been there for you in your times of need, so now please try to be there for her in her time of need. Sometimes we can forget our woes by reaching out to and helping those in need. That's a very valid point. I can tell you as a Virgo, I've put a lot of stock in. I frequently will avoid my own problems or try to correct my problems through correcting the problems of others. So that's very good advice, Dorothy. Thank you for leaving that for Melanie. I think that if you help others, you will spend some time either evaluating your problems or forgetting your problems. Samantha says, thanks, JC. You're welcome, absolutely. These are great questions. I hope you all enjoyed the new moon from last night. It was a very successful new moon, in my opinion. Of course, it was a new moon in Libra. Let me clarify that rule for you, for those who don't know. The new moon is always going to be in the same zodiacal house as the sun is when it occurs. So when a new moon happens, we should look to the sun and find out what house the sun is in. If the sun is in a specific zodiacal house, you must know that the new moon will always be in the same zodiacal house. If a full moon occurs, it will occur in the zodiacal house that is opposite the house occupied by the sun. All right? So for instance, if we had a full moon in Virgo, then that would imply that we have the sun in Pisces. But if we had a new moon in Virgo, that would imply that we have the sun in Virgo. See how that makes sense? It's important to know these kinds of things because when you are performing certain rituals or just going through a regular journal recording of your behaviors during certain lunar and solar cycles, you can recognize the impact. I know that I have started to really recognize and realize that depending on your level of sensitivity, the Virgo moon is extremely challenging. And I'm not just talking about new moons and full moons. I'm saying whenever the moon is in Virgo, it seems to really wreck a lot of people. It's very challenging. I first noticed this with Jessica. She has a very hard time with Virgo moons, but it is something that I've started to now recognize in a lot of other people. A lot of people have a very challenging time when the moon is in Virgo. Now, of course, a full moon in Virgo is extremely powerful and very intense. A new moon in Virgo, while still powerful, has a different tack. You know, the new moon is always, Peggy says, yes, I do too. Yeah, Peggy, you know, I think a lot of people really find that Virgo moon to be a thorn in their side. You know, it's almost, at least this is the opinion I'm developing, it is almost as though the moon in Virgo is the psychological or emotional equivalent of Mercury retrograde in communication and technology. So it's something that I'm formulating deeper opinions about as time goes by, but I've started to recognize a lot of these sorts of impacts on people around me. You know, the new moon is a time for planting seeds and preparing intentions, for getting ready to see and know and have things that we wanted to work on over time. If you, for instance, planned a move, you might want to take a step towards that move during the new moon. If you were planning on starting a business, you would take a step towards that business during the new moon. If you were trying to start a meaningful relationship, you might make some gesture towards that relationship during the new moon. Like you might buy a gift, you might take someone on a date, you might do something very grandiose to get the attention of someone. But you want to plant seeds and set intentions in the new moon. Now, ideally, you'll watch them come to fruition in the full moon, but if it's not the next full moon, it will be a full moon. So even if it's something as silly as writing a letter to yourself describing how successful you are now, you know, you're writing a future letter, right? This is something that I've recommended to a number of clients. Basically, during the new moon, you will write a letter, and that letter is taking the voice of a future, more successful self, and you're writing to a previous, less successful self. So it's like, Dear John, I can't begin to describe to you how, when I was in your position, I never knew that I would be as successful as I am today. I have $1 million in the bank and 3 homes in Malibu. You know, fill in the blanks where you see fit. And it's all thanks to the effort that I put into my life years ago when I was significantly less successful, by doing things like writing letters to my previous self, whatever you want to put into that. But it's a valuable exercise, and it's a point towards manifesting the kinds of prosperity that you want to see come to fruition. It's a way of signaling to the moon the things that you want. Jessica Richardson says, I do that every new moon, writing the letter. Hey, good job, Jessica. Yeah, I love that practice. I think it's almost as exciting, for me at least, as making requests on Joss paper and burning those. On the full moon, you want to reap the harvest. You want to take advantage of the things that you have benefited from. Now, sometimes we might feel during the full moon like we don't have any benefit, and I'm sorry, you do have benefit. You just have to see it. You have to accept it and appreciate it. Peggy says, what an awesome idea. Thank you, JC. Absolutely, Peggy. Thank you. Yeah, I like those letter writing ideas. I think they're very good. So when it's time to reap the benefit of our hard work or our investments, it's important for us to take stock in small successes. I value every success, and I celebrate every success, because I believe that if you do not celebrate successes, you will start having fewer and fewer of them. You know, I view the world in extremely reciprocal terms. I was born on Saturday, so my adopted father is Saturn. Now, my primary father is Mercury, because I was born a Virgo. And my secondary parent, I guess for lack of a better word, we call this an adopted parent, is Saturn. And then my chosen parent is Jupiter. So I'm Mercurial by my nature, by my build. I am reciprocal in my approach to the universe, and I am Jupiterian in my desire for the world around me. That's how you should all view your lives. Primary archon, secondary archon, tertiary archon. It's your primary parent, your secondary parent or adopted parent, and your tertiary or selected parent. I see the world in very reciprocal terms, having been born on Saturday, and therefore having Saturn as my adopted parent. So I see things as a give and take. So it's kind of like invitations to parties. I'm sure you all remember from when you were young and pretty and going around town with your bells on. If you don't respond to invitations, you'll stop receiving them. If you don't say yes once in a while, you won't get asked out anymore. If you don't say thank you, people stop doing things for you. If you don't recognize and acknowledge successes, fewer and fewer of them come to you. So I know in this day and age, we have a really hard time accepting small victories as valid. We want big victories. We want the Alfa Romeo and the house on the hill, or, you know, the fantastic degree from the Ivy League university, or we want to break into publishing with a great publishing house. Whatever your personal big picture of success is, I urge you to celebrate small victories. I'm going to get back to that in a second. Brittany says, I heard that you guys moved. I'm so sad but happy for your new adventure. Do you still do the medium appointments online, or does it not work that way? Thank you for asking, Brittany. Yes, we did move. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada right now. Jessica isn't with me in this moment because she's on a secret mission, but I am with you tonight. We are still doing everything online. So anybody who needs any services, I do face-to-face through Zoom, but I'm also available for telephone conferencing. And then Jessica and I are working on a conference for Crow's Cupboard members here in Vegas. That's a distant future project, but it's something we're working on right now, trying to put together the bones of. But in the meantime, if you live far away, as many of our tribe members always have, we do appointments by Zoom, by telephone, or by Duo Call. I like Duo Call because I like Google products. So we are available for all of our services, and you can contact us anytime you want, day or night. You can either DM us directly. In most cases, you'll get in touch with Jess. Many of you have my number. You can contact me directly. For those of you who know me on Telegram, you can contact me that way. If you follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn or any of those kinds of platforms, be careful, because if you direct message me, I'll probably never see it. Honestly, I have a number of followers, so I don't pay attention to DMs anymore. I haven't in a long time. It's smarter to reach out to Jess through DMs in Crow's Cupboard, or to text me if you have my number, or through Telegram, which is a smaller communication method. Debbie says, when talking about different moon phases and energies, what would the energies be for meteorite and or solar and lunar eclipses? Okay, so meteorite showers are hard. A lot of people who practice modern astrology believe that numerous meteorites, the older meteorites that do not break up and enter atmospheres, the ones that are part of the meteorite chain, these are the ones that should be recognized as influential as planets are. And since I'm not a modern astrologer, I'm a Ptolemaic astrologer, I don't buy into that concept. What I will tell you, because it does fit into Ptolemaic astrology, is that when meteorites are hitting, they're hitting in one or another house of the zodiac. So what I would say is, so that we can meet everyone's expectations and desires, Debbie, if there's a meteorite shower or a meteorite passing through a specific house of the zodiac, then that is the energy that is being emphasized, all right? Now, as you know, each house of the zodiac has its own energetic signature, its own identity, if you will. If we go with that notion, then we have to say that the same way the sun being right now in Libra has energized the house of Libra, and it puts a spotlight on social interactions and certain kinds of financial proceedings and affairs that are related to comfort. You would say the same thing for meteorite showers or meteorites passing through the houses of the zodiac. So a meteorite shower in Libra might emphasize the power of Libra on the evening of a given ritual, or it might just emphasize it in its impact on others. You talk about solar and lunar eclipses. The point to a solar eclipse or a lunar eclipse is unique because the power that a solar presence or a lunar presence for a primary luminary and a secondary luminary exhibiting its movement through a house of the zodiac, again, everything comes back to the zodiac, exhibiting itself through a house of the zodiac, while significant, we should be paying attention to the contrast, so that an eclipse is always a look within. It's an inversion. So let's say there's a solar eclipse in Virgo. I'll use Virgo because I know a lot about it. I'm a Virgo. A solar eclipse in Virgo would imply that we need to seriously reevaluate our understanding of organization and how we approach critical matters, our sense of analysis and scrutiny, and we should probably reverse those senses so that we are more open-minded or broad-minded about the things we were previously more critical of or analytical about. For instance, if you look at a lunar eclipse, because the moon symbolizes all things hidden and concealed, a lunar eclipse is the opposite of that. So a lunar eclipse implies transparency. So let's say I'm taking a lunar eclipse in Leo. A lunar eclipse in Leo would be a desire to look at our personal flaws, which is something that a Leo could never do because they would want to conceal their flaws. And the energy of Leo is one that is very bombastic, it's very braggadocious, it's very flamboyant, and it's very focused on misdirection. Look over there, not over here. So when we have a lunar eclipse in a house, we want to see that inversion of whatever would have been concealed, because the moon's theme is the hidden, the occult, the concealed. So a lunar eclipse flips it, and we should be paying attention to whatever is concealed or obfuscated naturally in that time. So those energies are the energies of transparency for lunar eclipse and the energies of reversals for a solar eclipse. Great question, Debbie. The subject of eclipses is complicated, and a lot of astrologers argue on that topic. I believe that as a ceremonial magician, the power of an eclipse needs to be harnessed because eclipses always hyper-energize the planetary hour that they occur in. So let's say I had a solar eclipse during the planetary hour of Mars on the day of Mercury, right? So on a Wednesday, there's a solar eclipse and it's happening in the Martian hour. That would tell me that there's a reversal of those Martian energies and a hypercharging of that reversal. So not only is it put down your weapons, it is be completely obedient to the enemy. And I mean in obedient, absolutely submit. Then we're going to look at it happening on Mercury's day, financial enemies. So if I was reading into that or performing a ritual for that occasion, a solar eclipse in the hour of Mars on the day of Mercury, I must completely submit to my enemies in financial matters in order to gain headway and potentially succeed against them. If I wanted to compound that, I would decide what house, what zodiacal house the sun was in during this eclipse. So to add to that, perhaps it was in the house of Pisces. So if the sun was in the house of Pisces during a solar eclipse, and it was happening in the Martian hour, the hour of Mars on that day, and the day is Mercury's day, I will have to obviously completely submit to my financial enemies, and because of the Piscean influence, I will spend my time during submission paying very close attention to what they seem preoccupied by. That way I'm collecting information to use in the future. And if I was designing a ritual around that, I would want to exploit whatever peripheral concerns my financial enemy was paying attention to, magically and energetically, to influence them so that once I'm no longer taking an obedient role or taking a subjective role, to use against them. I hope that makes sense. It's convoluted, and when you get into calculating planetary hours and performing rituals according to planetary hours and the days of the archons, you have to really think about your strategy, because there's a lot of strategy that goes into it. But it's definitely worth it, and it's totally my life study, so I think everyone should be studying it. Let's see. Debbie says, you don't see much info out there on this question, so I deeply appreciate your explaining and expertise on that. Thank you so much for enlightening us, JC. Absolutely. And Peggy says, can't thank you enough, JC. Thank you, Peggy. I appreciate that. Peggy says, well, I'm drawn in for sure. Definitely have to study this more. You know, that's kind of the interesting thing about astrology, and this is something that I talk a lot about in the cottage. If you aren't members, I highly recommend you join our subscription group, the Cottage. You can DM us for details. I spend a lot of time talking about these matters because when you look at astrology and the way it can be used to structure or govern all of our affairs, you can absolutely see how it can be used to all of your benefits, to navigate whatever difficulties you're having and to manipulate anything in your life. But I'll take it a step further. We also teach how once you have mastered any oracular art, any divination method, that method in and of itself can be used magically. I practice a lot of magic with cards and coins and dice. They are very useful tools, and I recommend and design a lot of enchantments using tarot cards, Lenormand cards, Loteria cards, all kinds of divination methods. But we can even take this natural step over to the subject of astrology, and that's cooked in, that's baked into the system. We watch planetary hours, we pay attention to the days of the archons, we pay attention to the seasons, and we make sure that our timing is perfect for everything we do in order to maximize the benefits that we want to see coming out of our efforts, magically, energetically. Erica Yee, there is a Nico Bostock, and he says not to worry. He has lots of friends now, and that they all came there the same way he did. So Erica, if you're there, little Nico wants you to know that you shouldn't worry about him. He has lots of friends now, more than he ever had before. When we are looking at the new moon cycles, and we are thinking about how we want to, and it looks like someone has been kind enough to put in the crowscupboard.com website. Yeah, that's great. So if you will click on crowscupboard.com, you can get information, details, and you'll have the opportunity to DM us about joining the cottage or getting any of our services, whether that's through Zoom or telephone or in person or anything of that variety. Melanie Brown-Miller. Hey, Melanie, there was a message for you just a little bit ago. I don't know if you came in too late to catch it. So there was a Dorothy Ralston, Melanie. Dorothy Ralston, your grandmother, she wants you to look out for Marilyn, your mother, because she says that she wants for you to try to help her because she's been there for you so much. Dorothy says that Marilyn has been there for you in your times of great need. So now you might not know this, but she's going through a hard time and you have to try to be there for her. And that the value of this is if you are there for her, then in turn, you will ameliorate some of your own difficulties. You know, sometimes, and I had a little conversation with the group about how if you allow yourself to help others, then you will, through that help, forget your problems or gain insight into your own problems. So Dorothy Ralston wants for you to help Marilyn. She's been there for you in the past. You need to be there for her. Melanie says, OMG. Peggy says, yes, the cottage has been a true blessing. Everyone can definitely benefit by joining. Thank you, Peggy. Yeah, I agree. That's where I probably spend the bulk of my time, is trying to write guides, and we do a lot of videos there, and it's a great group. We recommend it to anyone. I certainly think that while these Thursday night lives are fantastic, if you like a taste of what we can really do for you, then the cottage is the best way to go. So DM us and let us know, and certainly we will make sure that we make that happen for you. Lots of magic to be learned for sure. Getting back to, because I wanted to touch one more time on how we can use the lunar cycles. Not a lot of people pay attention to the crescents or to the quarters. A lot of people don't pay attention to the gibbous segments of lunar cycles. Melanie says, wow, my jaw hit the floor. Thank you. You're welcome, Melanie. Absolutely. A lot of people don't pay attention to the other cycles of the moon. People don't pay attention to the lunar phases outside of new and full, which makes sense because those are the super fabulous phases of the moon that everyone should be paying attention to. But it's important that we recognize the themes involved in the crescents, the quarters, and in the gibbous segments. So basically, I'm going to quickly go through a diagram of how the moon works. At the very top, we always will recognize that we have a new moon. The new moon then shifts from a new moon into a waxing crescent. The waxing crescent will then shift over to the first quarter. The first quarter will then go to a waxing gibbous, and then it'll go into a full. We go from full into the waning gibbous, third quarter, waning crescent, and back to the new moon. So those are the general quarters and gibbous segments as well as crescents. The segmentation of the lunar cycles is that we go from new and full. New growing to full is when we should be putting energy into activities and trying to develop or grow things. When we go from full to new, that's when we're taking energy away or giving energy up and releasing or relinquishing our hold on things, our grip on things. And a lot of that is healy-feely, emotional, empathic work, which is excellent. But for those of you who practice magic, it's important to know that there's a specific kind of theme here, isn't there? So when something needs to be built or grown or developed, we're looking at the waxing to full. If something needs to be trimmed or diminished or cut down or put asleep or concealed, that's when we go from waning to new, because these are imitative of the lumination cycles that we're paying attention to. It's also very important to recognize that the crescent moons in particular are usually associated with fertility and fertility cycles. The gibbous moons are usually associated with the health of the already living. So, if you have health magic to do, pay attention to the gibbous moons. If you have fertility work to do, pay attention to the crescent moons. The quarters are usually associated with financial and social affairs in ceremonial magic. There's a lot of ceremonial magic that focuses on first quarter work, growing wealth, and third quarter work, eliminating the wealth of your enemies. And of course, we've discussed new moon and full moon for the planting of seeds and for the reaping of harvests. A lot of the nomenclature tied to lunar workings does go back to the agricultural revolution. And a lot of the deities that are associated with the lunar phases are agricultural deities, deities that were tied to the grain, deities like Diana or Persephone, and of course the Titaness Hecate. So when we think about the mother as the supreme feminine, the divine feminine, we think of her in her visages as maiden, mother, and crone. Now, for me, of course, I usually associate the maiden version as Persephone, the mother version as Diana, and the crone version as Hecate. The Hecate does comprise the triplicity, the three of them in one. And the reason we want to identify them in these separate ways, whether it's Kore or maiden, the mother, the mater, and the crone, is because we want to acknowledge not only how our identities have parallels to different lunar phases, but the focal points of our efforts during specific phases. It's important to organize what we're doing and when we're doing it with all practices, whether it's divination or magic or anything at all. You have to organize the information and make sure that your timing is perfect. If your timing is not perfect, then you will not get as good of a result as you would if your timing was perfect. So, that having been said, I'm going to start drawing things to a close. If anybody has any questions before I sign off, now would be your time to ask. As I said, Jessica's on a secret mission, but I feel confident you will see her next week. No problems about that. And if you ever want to reach out and drop her a DM, I'm sure that she will get back to you. She's usually very, very responsive when it comes to messaging from any of our public. I do think that we have to hold on tight because this Mercury retrograde has proven to be a little challenging. If you haven't taken the right kinds of precautions, please do. You can DM us for some specific cures. I make some very powerful Mercury squares that we can provide you with. We also have Mercury dimes. Jessica does a number of different talismanic jewelry articles that we can provide you with. I don't mind sharing with you that if you can do nothing else, a nice yellow candle on Wednesdays or a blue candle on Wednesdays lesser than the yellow candle will certainly be effective and help to ameliorate some of these circumstances. But we should also be spending this time, as I mentioned previously, introspectively paying attention to what it is that short circuits our communication with others, and why it is that means of travel or technology don't really work for us the way we want them to. Debbie Sprakes says, let me come back to that, Debbie, I apologize. When these questions get away from me, it gets so challenging to properly move through them. Let's see, so she says, when would the right timing be to create a divination tool? And then after that, let me see. I apologize, guys. This gets so challenging. Tell her we missed her this week. Have a great night. Thank you, Samantha. Jessica says, I thank you for your enlightenment. Appreciate you. Hope you have a great rest of your night. And Dee Dee says, what can you recommend for vertigo? Okay, so 2 questions, vertigo and divination tool. All right, Debbie, timing for divination tool. That's a very good question. So traditionally, and in ceremonial magic, Mercury is the most powerful sponsor for divinatory arts. And I would say pick Mercury's day, Wednesday, and pick one of the mercurial hours. If you can't calculate them, certainly we can talk a little bit about that, but I always recommend you start with a sunrise hour, wherever you are, whatever time zone you're in. And in the sunrise hour on Wednesday is the best possible time to make a divination tool. The second option would be the sunrise hour on a Monday, the moon's day. So sunrise Monday or sunrise on Wednesday would be the best times to make a divination tool, without a doubt. Second question from Dee Dee was, what can you recommend for vertigo? And Dee Dee, that's such a hard question because vertigo is one of those things tied to balance and the inner ear. So what I would say for handling vertigo specifically is going to go to the archonic designations for different organs. The ears themselves are tied to the two benefics, Jupiter and Venus. Because they're tied to vertigo as well, I would say you need to work with Jupiter and Venus and the organs that they govern. So your vertigo is probably a side effect of some difficulties with your kidneys and some difficulties with your liver. If I was going to do anything, I would say first, try by flushing them with lots and lots of water. Not too much, obviously you don't want to get sick, but proper hydration is vital. And if you can start taking any kinds of supplements, obviously after speaking with your physician first, that will help you in your kidney health and your liver health, that would go a long, long way. The other thing I can recommend, because it helps with all things cranial, is chalcedony. I typically recommend chalcedony for memory problems, but I personally have had some success using chalcedony for vertigo. I haven't had many occasions in a long time, but it does work. I also think that it's a good idea for you to consider what kind of electronic smog you're around and maybe carry a piece of shungite to ameliorate some of the electronic smog you're around, because what we call vertigo is sometimes just sensitivity to an EM field, and reducing that EM field might go a long way towards helping. So those are the things I would recommend. Peggy says, thank you so much, get some rest, have a great night. Thank you, Peggy. I will have a great night. We've both been running ourselves ragged trying to get everything together here, but everything is coming together quickly and nicely, and it's really going very, very well. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. Dee Dee, I hope I answered your question. Debbie, I hope I answered your question. So I'm going to sign off for now. Dee Dee says thank you. You're welcome, Dee Dee. I'm going to sign off for now. Everyone take care of yourselves. I hope to see you all very soon in the cottage, but if not, we'll see you here. And until next Thursday, oh, Debbie says, thank you so much for all the information this evening. Deeply appreciate it, JC. Have a blessed weekend and good night. Thank you, Debbie. A blessed weekend and good night to all of you. We love you all, and we hope to see you all very, very soon. Take care of yourselves. Much love.